We're going to wait just a few minutes to make sure that everyone has a chance to enter our virtual room and to make sure that all of our technology is working appropriately. So please just bear with me for a minute or two. And for those of us just joining us, we're just waiting a minute or two. I see on my screen that a few of you are still connecting to our audio. So we'll wait a few moments and then we'll get started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning. Good morning. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is a status conference for the pending petition for assignment of state filed application 5634 and the associated water right application 5634X of Nevada Irrigation District, and the pending request for release from priority of state filed applications 5633 and 5634 in favor of water right license 11120 of South Sutter Water District. This status conference is being held in accordance with the notice of status conference issued by my office dated July 7th, 2021. This status conference is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording along with the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time today you are experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us, please send an email to the AHO at adminhrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. There are AHO staff who will be monitoring the email inbox, so our staff can let me know that we're having issues and we will try to work with you on that. If at any time I am having technical difficulties, please just be patient. If I'm not able to reconnect within a few minutes, my staff will let us know that we'll be taking a brief recess, but hopefully we'll avoid that problem. Again, my name is Nicole Kinsey. You may address me as Ms. Kinsey or hearing officer as you prefer. I plan to address each of you by your last name today. This is a formal proceeding, but please do correct me if I mispronounce your name. There's quite a few of you and quite a few of you who I have not met before in our proceedings. So please do correct me if I mispronounce your name or otherwise misaddress you. Assisting me today are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office: Nicole Mullen, Amy Blunk, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Wooldridge. I'd like at this time to move to appearances. There are, as I mentioned, quite a number of you on the call, which is great. To do that, I'm going to identify each of the entities or persons who filed notices of intent to appear today. And as I do, if you are representing that entity or representing yourself, please unmute your microphone and state your name. As we proceed, though, please keep your microphone muted except when you're speaking so that we can minimize background noise. And once I go through the appearances of those who I have received NOIs from, I'll also ask if there's anyone else joining us today to make sure we've identified everyone who is on the Zoom conference with us. So let's go ahead and get started with Nevada Irrigation District.
Good morning, Andrew McClure of the Manassian Law Firm for Nevada Irrigation District.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. McClure. South Sutter Water District.
Sorry, Ms. Kinsey. Dustin Cooper, also on behalf of Nevada Irrigation District. And if I may, Ms. Kinsey, we also have Jennifer Hansen, who's NID's general manager. And I notice we also have a couple NID board members that will just be viewing the proceeding today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. I apologize. I didn't give you time to jump in. Thank you for the introductions. At this time, I'll move to South Sutter Water District.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Kevin O'Brien of Downey Brand, representing South Sutter Water District. Also with me this morning is my colleague Austin Cho, and I'll ask him to separately introduce himself.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Austin Cho of Downey Brand on behalf of South Sutter Water District.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Cho. Moving from here in no particular order, I will move on to Contra Costa Water District. Do we have Mr. Cody from Contra Costa Water District? I will come back and circle back, and near the end, we may have some technical difficulties. From here, I'll move on to Camp Far West Irrigation District.
Good morning, Ms. Quincy. It's Nick Bonsignor with Wagner and Bonsignor Consulting Civil Engineers.
Good morning, Mr. Bonsignor. Yuba County Water Agency.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. This is Holly Jacobson on behalf of Yuba County Water Agency.
Good morning, Ms. Jacobson. State Water Contractors.
Good morning, Kira Johnson on behalf of State Water Contractors.
Good morning, Ms. Johnson. Placer County Water Agency.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. Dan Kelly, Placer County Water Agency.
Good morning, Mr. Kelly. U.S. Bureau of Reclamation.
Ray Sahlberg, Bureau of Reclamation.
Good morning, Mr. Sahlberg.
Good morning.
California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. My name is Nancy Murray with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I also have Bridget Gibbons on. I'll let her introduce herself.
Yes, good morning. This is Bridget Gibbons for California Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, Ms. Murray, and good morning, Ms. Gibbons. Thank you. California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Good morning, Chris Schutz from California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Good morning, Mr. Schutz. Trout Unlimited.
Good morning, everybody. This is Brian Johnson with Trout Unlimited.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Friends of the River.
Good morning, you all. This is Ron Stork at Friends of the River.
Good morning, Mr. Stork.
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. I'm Ashley Overhouse. I'm also appearing on behalf of Friends of the River.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Overhouse.
Good morning.
Foothills Water Network.
Good morning, Tracy Sheehan of the Foothills Water Network.
Good morning, Ms. Sheehan. Sierra Club.
David Zelensky, Motherlode Chapter, Sierra Club. I think Sean Worth is also here.
Yes, he is.
Good morning, Mr. Zielinski, and good morning, Mr. Worth. Thank you. American Whitewater.
Good morning, Teresa Lorejo Simpson with American Whitewater.
Good morning, Ms. Lorejo Simpson. Nevada City Rancheria Tribal Council. I have noted here Ms. Covert or Covert. I'll return back at the end to see if we have someone joining us. Moving on from there, American Rivers.
Good morning, Matt Freitas, American Rivers.
Good morning, Mr. Freitas. South Yuba River Citizen League.
Good morning, Melinda Booth with the South Yuba River Citizens League, joined by my colleague as well.
Good morning, Keiko Mertz with South Yuba River Citizens League.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Booth, and thank you, Ms. Mertz. American River Watershed Institute.
Otis Wallen and our attorney is also present.
Good morning, Mr. Wolin, and is that Mr. Mooney? Are you present
Don
as well?
Mooney. Correct. Don Mooney is also present, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Protect American River Canyons.
Good morning, Tim Woodall with Protect American River Canyons.
Good morning, Mr. Woodall. Save Auburn Ravine Salmon and Steelhead. Excuse the dog. Mr. Sanchez, are you with us? I will return back. Excuse me for a moment. I apologize.
I think we can tell she's working from home at this point.
I am working from home. I'm very, very sorry about that. Usually I have that one under control, but not this morning. My apologies again. Northern California Council of Fly Fishers International. I have Mr. Rockwell on my list.
Mark, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Mark Rockwell, Northern California Council of Fly Fishers International President.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Next, I have Diana Suarez and Cam Suarez.
Good morning, Diana Suarez, representing Diana and Cam Suarez.
Wonderful. Good morning, Ms. Suarez. David Sprunk and Sherry Sprunk.
Good morning, Sherry Sprunk, representing David and Sherry Sprunk.
Good morning, Ms. Sprunk. Bob Center. I'll come back to that. Dan Buckley with Tributary Whitewater. And last, I have Jeff Lighton or Litton. And so you all know, I did receive, our office received an email from Mr. Litton this morning letting us know that he may not be able to make it, and that included a public comment on the status conference today. That email is saved on the FTP folder for all of you to see if you would like to see that comment. Let me return back to some of those who who were not present initially. Do I now have anyone from Contra Costa Water District? Nevada City Rancheria Tribal Council? Save Auburn Ravine Salmon and Steelhead?
Ms. Kinsey, this is Tracy Sheehan, Foothills Water Network. Both the SARCIS, as it's known, and Dan Buckley from Tributary Whitewater were protestants that joined in the Foothills Water Network letter as a protestant. And so I am able to be here on their behalf.
Great, thank you very much. I also have Northern California Council. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Rockwell, we got you. You came off mute, so check that. And then I think remaining, we only have Bob Center. Mr. Center, have you joined us?
Ms. Kinsey, the same goes for Bob Center. This is Tracy Sheehan, Foothills Water Network. Bob was a signer on the Foothills Water Network protests and a network protestant, so I can be here on his behalf.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. I appreciate that. With that, I think I've gone through the list that I have of people and entities who have filed NOIs. Is there anyone else who is on the conference call who intends to participate today who has not yet identified themselves or introduced themselves?
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. This is Kelly Tabor, appearing on behalf of the Camp Far West Irrigation District.
Yes, and you should be on my list. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got Mr. Bonsignor, and I also have you listed here. Thank you, Ms. Tabor, and welcome.
Good morning. This is Ricky Heck. I am an elected board member for Nevada Irrigation District.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who is on the call who would like to introduce themselves?
Good morning. This is Laura Peters. I'm also an elected director of Nevada Irrigation District.
Thank you. Good morning. With that, I had, as we've gone through my list, thank you for your patience working through our introductions this morning and appearances. I did want to ask maybe Mr. McClure or possibly Mr. Cho. We sent notices to PG&E, because my understanding is they're a protestant, at least to the Nevada Irrigation District petition and application. And at first we had an incorrect email address, and then we have an email address that seems to have expired. If I can just make a request, if you happen to have any updated contact information for PG&E, if you could send that to my office by email, that would be appreciated. Otherwise, we will find a more general address to notify them with. But I did want to try to correct that. And if you happen to have contact information through the protest resolution process, that would be appreciated.
I'll do that, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. I appreciate it.
Likewise, we'll take a look through our records.
Thank you. So to get started, I wanted to thank all of you for submitting your NOIs. We now have a more current service list for this proceeding, which is very, very helpful. I also wanted to thank all of you for your patience in setting up this conference and the date and time for the status conference today. I know we had some changes, so I appreciate your flexibility there. I did receive status conference statements from Nevada Irrigation District, South Sutter Water District, Camp Far West, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Foothills Water Network, and a comment from Ms. Suarez. Did any other party file a status conference statement that I didn't mention? I'd like to make sure that we have our files in order and I didn't miss anything. If you did, if you file a statement and I didn't list it, please speak up. It was not required. I just want to make sure I have all those that were filed. With that, I'll move on to say I've read the status conference statements. Thank you. So you don't need to repeat that information today unless there's something that you would particularly like to emphasize, or if I ask questions and need some clarity on the issues. The purpose of the status conference today is to discuss procedural matters as to how to move forward with respect to Nevada Irrigation Districts, which I probably will call NID, the pending petition for assignment and their application, and then South Sutter Water District's request for release from priority. The substance of the petition, application, and request for release from priority are discussed in more detail in the notice of status conference that I mentioned earlier that was issued by our office on July 7th, 2021. So I'm not going to repeat that information now, but I just wanted to lay out the expectations for the day. I'm not going to be making any decisions as a result of our discussion today on the merits of these issues. We're here to discuss how to move forward with an appropriate process as to how to deal with these pending matters. The time and place to discuss the merits of the issues will be during any hearing that we may hold down the line, whether it's with these two matters and come together as one or separately. So I just wanted to frame up those expectations for our morning. I know many of you have a very significant interest in the outcome of these proceedings, and I encourage you to provide input today on the process of how we work through these. But if you would refrain for now in addressing the merits of the issues, there will be an appropriate time and place and opportunity for you to present evidence and make arguments and make public statements when we get to a hearing on the merits of all of these issues. In terms of an agenda for this conference this morning, I think first what I'd like to do is hear a summary from NID about the status of their project, which I believe is the Centennial Reservoir Project, but you're going to correct me if I'm confusing the reservoirs. And a recap of the issues 1 through 5 that were identified in the notice of status conference. And then I'd like to discuss next steps for the petition for assignment of state filed application 5634 and the associated water right application 5634X. I will ask to hear from all of the parties. You'll all have an opportunity today to comment on how we should proceed moving forward. I'll probably just work through the list because there are so many of us. So I'll probably just go down the line. I ask for your patience on that. And then after we work through those issues, I'd like to turn to issue number 6 from the notice of status conference, which is South Sutter's requests for release from priority of state filed applications 5633 and 5634 in favor of water right license 11120, and the question of whether it's appropriate for us to schedule a hearing on that issue at this time. So that is what I see moving forward. And I will, on that as well, I will ask if there are any comments from the other participants on this call on how we deal with that process. So let's get started with NID's petition for assignment of state filed application 5634 and the associated water right application. And I'll just ask Mr. McClure, where are we? What do you see as your preferred process for moving forward? What is the status of this application? And At what point do you think it would be appropriate to schedule a hearing on the application, or what other process do you think we should set up moving forward?
Thank you. I think it'd probably be more efficient for me to just provide a narrative instead of working through questions 1 through 5 and then 6.
Great.
So in summary, the answer is yes, NID is still pursuing this petition. The petition, as far as we know, is validly pending at the state board. Our recommended sequence and what we think the most efficient strategy is allow NID to complete its plan for water process by the end of 2022. Through that process, we are going to have a comprehensive analysis of supply and demand, really global look at what this project needs to be, what NID's future demand and supply is. That's going to help us develop a finite project description for a CEQA document. We have made significant progress on a CEQA, sort of an administrative draft, but we need to update that, and we need to define what the project is and what the appropriate scope of alternatives should be. That's all going to be driven by this plan for water process, which is also going to include numerous public meetings and public outreach, really, again, a comprehensive look at what the district needs and its customers need. End of 2022, we think realistically it's going to take 3 years to complete the CEQA document. That sounds like a long time, but this is a big project and it's going to require new modeling efforts. We're going to incorporate new data that we will have collected over the past 5 years. A lot of issues, updating biological studies, et cetera. So again, 3 years sounds like a long time, but we'd rather take our time and get the draft CEQA document right. Once we issue the draft EIR, then we will be in a position to really meaningfully address the protests that we received on the initial application, many of which raised issues that are squarely in the draft EIR analysis. So once that draft is on the street, we'll be in a position to, the protestants will better understand what our impact analysis is and what our alternatives and mitigations are. We will then recommend a 1-year period to complete negotiations for the resolution of protests. That's a number that I saw in Foothills Water Network status conference, and it seems like, again, a reasonable period of time. There are a lot of protestants, a lot of issues. That puts us in January 2026 for a hearing. And we're not opposed to setting that hearing for that time, with the understanding that it could be accelerated if the draft EIR and negotiations are concluded sooner. But that would really be an end date that would hopefully motivate parties to meaningfully negotiate and try and get these resolved. And we do think that should be a joint hearing between NID's application and South Sutter's application. And the reason is that both the legal and a lot of the factual issues really are interrelated. And we can talk about this in more detail when we get to that specific question. But point of fact is South Sutter's application was filed at the same time they protested NID's application. A lot of legal issues like county of origin and water right priorities, what the scope of South Sutter's project is in relation to NID's on the Bear River watershed. Those are all issues that are going to need to be presented to a finder of fact if we're unable to negotiate a resolution. That presentation should only have to happen once. That will make sure we're using the same data, comparing apples and apples in terms of time scope and updated modeling, and a finder of fact and the legal issues. If we do it 5 years apart, which is one potential outcome, we have the prospect of inconsistent decisions and inconsistent data. So our recommendation is a joint hearing 2026. We can put that on the calendar at the hearing officer's discretion, whether we do it now or revisit with the intent to potentially accelerate. But that's, as we stand here today, what we think the most efficient process is. That'll allow us to really globally look at the project and hopefully resolve the protest to the extent that we can.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Just to clarify for me, to make sure I understand that and that I was following your dates, which I know some, probably all of them are in your status conference statement, but you were looking at the end of 2022, is that right? So I don't know, November, December 2022 to complete the plan for water process? Is that
correct?
Accurate? And then 3 years, would that put you at the end of 2025 for the draft EIR, or is that 2020? You were looking at the end of 2025 for the draft EIR?
Actually, January 2025.
January, okay.
So not a full 3 years.
And then that's where we get the year. I was just trying to work from January 2026 of the year.
I think that's right.
Good, thank you. Thank you. I think I'd like to hear from other folks on this, and then I may come back to you, Mr. McClure, if I have other questions or you have other comments that you'd like to make after that. I'll turn first to Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Cho with South Sutter Water District, whether you have comments on the proposed schedule by NID.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kinsey. As you know, in our papers, we requested that the hearing process on our request for release from priority move forward, and we're reserving that position. But I did want to let you know that recently I've met with Mr. Cooper and Ms. Hanson, the general manager of NID, along with South Sutter's general manager, Brad Arnold. And I think we had some very positive discussions about the possible resolution of our request for release from priority. So I wanted to make you aware of that, first of all. And secondly, I think it would be helpful if we could build into the schedule some period of time for the two districts to have further discussions in the hopes that perhaps our request for release from priority issues could be removed from this hearing process. I think that would certainly simplify your job going forward. Having said that, I'm not prepared today to agree to the proposed schedule that Mr. McClure outlined. I certainly understand there's much to do before NID will be ready to move forward with the processing of its petition. But at this point, I do have to reserve our position that the request for release from priority should move forward at some point. But I think if we could have some time to have some fairly focused discussions about that, I'm optimistic we may be able to reach a settlement of those issues.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I think contrary to the agenda I just outlined, now that we've introduced these issues and they do seem to be interrelated, maybe we should talk about them together. So on that, Mr. O'Brien, I did have a couple of questions about the request for release from priority. I just want to make sure I understand the facts a little bit, which is my understanding is that it's Camp Far West Reservoir, and correct me if that's wrong, but that there are 2 licenses associated with the reservoir, one of which already has a release from priority. Is that accurate? And then
that's correct. That's correct. Yes.
And it was a historical, I don't know, a feature of just the timeline of the way these things occurred, that the one release from priority for one license was granted while the other, for whatever reason, was not.
Correct.
That's accurate. And then at this time, with respect to the request from release of priority, are you anticipating that there would be any kind of environmental documentation, or is that would be necessary for the State Water Board to act, or give it, or is it it's not expected to impact the operations of the reservoir in any way?
It's not expected to impact the operations. We certainly wouldn't expect to prepare an EIR, possibly an initial study, just to confirm that there would be no impacts associated with this request.
And that at this point, that process hasn't been started.
Correct.
And then so At this point, I understand that you're in negotiations with NID with respect to how these two your respective interests might be worked out. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding that at this point, you would ask for an additional period of time before any hearing is scheduled to allow for additional time to discuss with NID both the request for release from priority and their project as that evolves. Do you have what is some reasonable period of time? Do you have a number? Are we talking 2 years or 3 months or just?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I would think we would need 4 months to complete that discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn back to you, Mr. McClure, and then we'll go forward. I promise everyone here, I'm going to ask to hear from you, but since I just combined our agenda in two, and because it seems that these issues seem to go together. Mr. McClure, do you want to comment at all on South Sutter's request for release from priority and the process for that?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for the hearing officer to hear a little bit of the context and history of this. So, as I said, the South Sutter application was filed concurrent with its protest of NID's application. And at that time, NID was working on the answer to the protest to the NID application. We asked the State Water Board, do we need to protest the South Sutter application? And the response was, no, we are going to notice the South Sutter application at the same time we notice the NID application for hearing. You don't need to protest or otherwise respond to the South Sutter application. So at this time, if you look in the administrative record, you won't see an NID protest, although, while we're encouraged to continue to have discussions, we would certainly need an opportunity to get something on file. I think you probably get a good idea of a lot of the arguments that NID would raise in our answer to South Sutter's protest, again, just because the issues are so intertwined. A lot of the same legal concepts are at issue, but just so you know, we haven't had an opportunity to formally respond to that application, and that was at the Water Board's request. And I think it's also important for the hearing officer to understand that it was Water Board's position from the outset that these applications would be heard together. And although 4 years have passed since the Water Board took that position, I don't think meaningfully in terms of facts or law, anything has changed that should alter the Water Board's perspective or position on that. That's certainly not to say NID and South Sutter can't have negotiations, and ideally there would be a mutually agreeable resolution. And if anything else, the status conference has spurred those discussions. But in terms of an actual hearing, we think that would be premature until NID's application is noticed for hearing. And for all the reasons I articulated before, that should not happen for some time.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Appreciate that. At this point, I would like to hear from the other participants, once again, comments on the schedule and how we move forward in this proceeding. I'll probably move down the list in roughly the same order that I asked for your appearances, just so you can anticipate where I'm going. So I'll start with Ms. Tabor and Mr. Bonsignor for Camp Far West Irrigation District.
Good morning. Camp Far West has identified its concerns in its status conference statement, and it's our expectation that we'll be able to resolve those concerns by working with South Sutter Water District. So we don't have any position right now on timing of a hearing or process, but we are hopeful that we'll have sufficient time to work out those issues before a hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Tabor. Ms. Jacobson for Yuba County Water Agency. Do you have any comments on process?
At this time, Yuba County Water Agency does not have any comments about the process. We'll reserve that to see how it develops.
Sure, thank you very much. State water contractors.
We don't have comments on process at this point. You'll note that we did not file a protest to the initial application. And I'm not sure why that was. That was under a different general manager and different general counsel. So I'm here to gather information today, and we may be reaching out to see how we can participate going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Placer County Water Agency.
No additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. U.S. Bureau of Reclamation.
No comments at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Ms. Murray and Ms. Gibbons with Department of Fish and Wildlife.
So at this time, I think one point is very preliminary, but that these applications should be heard together. They are intertwined. The idea of separating them out and letting one go first does seem antithetical to what the reality of the watershed is. We'll reserve other comments, but on the timeline, we do want sufficient time for a CEQA document to be done and for protest resolutions. So I don't have specific comments other than we would appreciate time for a robust EIR, CEQA document, and protest resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Mr. Schutz with CSPA.
Yes, and I'm going to try to summarize on behalf of the Foothills Water Network Group. My colleagues may wish to correct me or otherwise tell me that I haven't got it quite right. Several things. Starting with South Sutter, we strongly believe that their issue should be worked into the resolution of the overall NID petition and application. And that's for efficiencies and our bandwidth, as well as the substantive and legal issues involved. There's also a CEQA question there. And I'm not sure whether the CEQA question for South Sutter gets resolved in an NID CEQA document or whether it needs to be done separately, but somehow there needs to be some kind of CEQA coverage and trying moving ahead to hearing without that would be premature as well. In our pre-conference statement, we identified the 1 year following completion of the draft EIR as an appropriate protest resolution period. We appreciate the fact that Nevada Irrigation District has finds that tentatively acceptable. We're a little concerned about the overall timeline that Nevada Irrigation District has proposed to complete its CEQA document. We feel that that completion could take place more quickly and that some of the work on the boilerplate parts, at least, of the CEQA document could be going on concurrently with the plan for water. So we'd be looking hopefully at something more along the lines of completion of the CEQA document by the end of 2023 or beginning of 2024. This has been going on for quite a while, and a lot of things can change within the space of several years in terms of personnel and other things. And while we appreciate the need to do a thorough and complete CEQA document and have that process play out, we also have time considerations, and we'd like to see that timeline move forward a little more quickly. I think that's the majority of the issues, unless you have any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Schutz. I think that was very clear, and I understood you. So I will, Foothills Water Network, when I get to you, I will ask whether you have anything to add to Mr. Schutz's summary. For now, because I have to go in order, otherwise I'll lose track. Let's move to Trout Unlimited.
I join in what Chris just said.
Thank you. That was very concise. Appreciate it. Friends of the River.
I recognize Ashley Overhouse on that one. If she's still here.
Ms. Overhouse.
I'm still here. Thank you, Mr. Stork. I would also like to endorse what Mr. Schutz just said on behalf of Friends of the River, please.
Thank you. And then I will turn to Ms. Sheehan with Foothills Water Network. Do you have anything to add to?
I have nothing to add, and I agree with what Mr. Schutz outlined. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Worth and Mr. Zelinski with the Motherlode chapter of Sierra Club.
No, we'll just endorse what Chris Schutz said.
Agreed.
Convenient. Thank you. I appreciate it. American Whitewater.
We agree with Mr. Schutz.
Thank you. Mr. Friedis with American Rivers.
We also agree with Mr. Schutz and the Foothills Water Network's collective responses to protestants.
Thank you. I appreciate that. South Yuba River Citizens League.
We concur with Mr. Schutz on behalf of Foothills Water Network. Thanks.
Thank you. American River Watershed Institute.
While we concur with Mr. Schutz's comments, we did have one additional legal comment, which our attorney Don Mooney may be able to address, and that's regarding the notice of intent for the CEQA document. It's quite old, and we believe it should be reissued in order to have our comments to be more timely and more informed. And I don't know if Don Mooney is still there. Don, would you like to address that very succinctly in legal terms?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Our concern is that I think the notice of preparation is what was being referred to as was prepared some 5 years ago. And under CEQA, the agency has the discretion, or the notice of preparation, the date of the notice of preparation sets the date for the environmental baseline. We're going to have a CEQA document that now is going to be available in a draft that's going to be available in January 2025. That's 3.5 years from now. That means the notice of preparation will be 8 years old at that time. And a lot is changing in the world, especially with water supply, drought, climate change, fires we're all witnessing, and all of those issues. And I think there needs to be some assurance from NID that the draft EIR is not going to rely necessarily on a environmental baseline that will be outdated. And having litigated many CEQA cases, occasionally you come across where, and I did this recently on a Caltrans project, where a notice of preparation had been issued 10 years before the draft EIR was released. And then their traffic study was based upon 10 years ago, because that was the baseline they were allowed to use. And the law does provide the agency discretion to change that environmental baseline. So I think we would like to see some assurances from NID that that the environmental document is not going to necessarily rely on an environmental baseline that is outdated and quite, very outdated for what's going on in the world right now with climate change and such. And not to say that the document should be delayed further to do that, but if they've got 3 years now, then there should be from today, or from about now to over 3 years, they want to release it. I think the parties should have some assurances from NID that we're not going to be fighting a very outdated baseline and NID just sitting back and relying on the provisions of CEQA that says that's a legally adequate baseline.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. And Mr. McClure, I won't ask you to respond right at this time, but you'll have a chance once we hear from everyone, you'll have a chance to make any comments you'd like to make. I'm looking at it. Here we are. The Protect the American River Canyons.
Yes, Park would concur with the comments made by Mr. Schutz.
Thank you. And then turning to the individuals today, Ms. Suarez, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to file my statement. I would additionally like to bring up the people who are living in Bear River Canyon under the threat of inundation for the last 7 years. These communities have been negatively impacted. The real estate market has tanked. Nevada County is attempting to replace the bridge at Dog Bar Crossing on Bear River. The impacts to grant requests for fuels treatment. We just had a devastating wildfire. There will be upcoming needs for rehabilitation. And the impending project has created a problem for our communities and the people that live here. I would request maybe an updated notice of preparation with a different placeholder instead of Centennial Dam project. Thank you.
And Ms. Suarez, if I may ask, I understand your comments and the impact on real estate and the uncertainty associated with this project. In general, would it be in your interest, do you think, to bring this project to a hearing more quickly, or would you generally support a longer timeline that may involve I guess I could just say, Mr. McClure laid out the possibilities, but a longer timeline to allow for negotiations, a developed EIR, that kind of thing is I just want to understand what, in terms of a timing of a hearing, is your interest in having the hearing sooner or having more time for the negotiation process? Do you have any comments on that?
I think the planning process is excellent. I applaud NID for returning to the proper procedure and creating a project such as this. I'm asking for relief for the people. That would be 12 years till 2026 that they've been suffering under this threat. Some people have given up their homes, their retirement dream homes. Other people have generations of families in these homes. We need relief from the Centennial Dam project. The water rights application is not a problem for us, but the specific project impacting our communities is. If there is some vehicle to relieve the communities from this impact, that would be preferable. If an updated notice of preparation could make a more generic reference to a project, that would be acceptable, or canceling this application, doing the planning and resubmitting would be acceptable as well.
Thank you, Ms. Suarez. That was very helpful and very clear. Ms. Sprunk, do you have any additional comments on the process today?
No, I don't have any comments on the process at this time.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone who is on the line who has additional comments before I turn back to NID and South Sutter Water District?
Yes, Mark Rockwell with the Fly Fishers International.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I have you crossed off and now crossed on. I know you're here. Thank you. Mr. Rockwell, please.
Yes, I would just say we fully agree with Mr. Schutt's comments and support the comments filed by the Foothill Water Network.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, do you have any comments in response?
It's in NID's interest to do a complete, adequate CEQA document. Mr. Mooney's comments are received and well taken. He makes some interesting points. We'll certainly consider those when we start work again on CEQA. In terms of timing, like I say, it's in NID's interest to move this forward when we have the right information. And we think we're being potentially conservative in our estimate of time, but also realistic. And we'd rather aim for compliance deadlines, if any are going to be set, that can be accomplished. And so, like I said, if we are able to complete this sooner, then we would do so and notify the hearing officer, and that could move timelines forward. But as we sit here today, we think what we've proposed is reasonable and can be accomplished.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Mr. O'Brien, do you have any additional comments on any of these issues?
Just briefly, Ms. Kinsey, we've heard from a number of parties, I think including Mr. McClure, that ultimately the South Sutter request for release from priority should be heard together with the NID application. And I guess I get that argument to some extent from a pure efficiency standpoint, but I do want to make the point that this release from priority relates to a reservoir that's an ongoing operation, the Campfire West Reservoir, which provides very significant groundwater recharge benefits to the groundwater basin in that area. This question of the priority of those licenses is essentially a cloud on the title of South Sutter Water District's water rights, and it creates some real challenges for the district as it thinks about things like investing money in spillway upgrades, which is a $20 million project. There are some real consequences to having this issue stay unresolved until 2026 or later. And so I just wanted to note that. I don't think we need to definitively address this issue today, but I do think there are some counter arguments on the timing issue that I want you to be aware of, and at the appropriate time, if necessary, I think we should have the opportunity to brief those issues.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I'll go ahead and take a moment and comment on what I am thinking about going forward. I have to say, coming into this conference, based on the information and simply reading the statements and the documents, I was inclined to separate out these issues and set the South Sutter Water District issue for hearing. Frankly, both of these were assigned to the Administrative Hearings Office by the State Water Board Executive Management so that they move forward and may go to hearing. That said, a hearing from all of you today, I'm not going to make a decision on that issue. I think the issues may be more interrelated than I had anticipated based on my initial review of the documents and the information. What I would like to do is set this out for another status conference and return together. I think it's August 31st today. Even if we did less than 4 months, that would put us well into the holiday season. So I'm going to look at sometime early next year for us to reconvene. But what I would like to do at that point, I will ask, and I'll issue a ruling after this status conference, but I would like to ask Nevada Irrigation District if you would submit a proposed timeline and schedule. My anticipation is if we set out this hearing, whether it's early, what do we talk about, early 2026 or whether it's earlier, I do want to have regular check-ins, probably every 6 months or as you see appropriate, whether it's 4 to 6 months as you see appropriate, given the various milestones of moving this forward. I just want to check in. Those don't always have to be lengthy meetings, but to check in to see where we are to keep this moving forward, because I do think that is the charge that I have been given from the State Water Board, is to move both of these matters along, which is why I was initially looking at setting out the request for release from priority separately, because I thought that was an issue that can move forward. Upon discussion, it sounds like there may or may not be an environmental document that the board could base a decision on at this point on the request for release from priority. So I would ask Mr. O'Brien if your client could, in addition to working with NID, discussing with NID and any other party who you may meet with and work together to see if you can reach some resolution, also think about or get started on any environmental documentation to think about when a reasonable time for a hearing might be if we did set it separately. Like I said, I have not made any decision on that issue, and I think I would like to hear more before making a decision on that issue. And it may end up being, based on your negotiations, you may come to an agreement. So that would be great. So so Mr. McClure and I said, I'll write this down so we all have it. But Mr. McClure, I'm asking for a timeline from NID. Mr. O'Brien, if I could have some, I suppose it would also be a timeline from South Sutter Water District of your best case scenario of when you think the request for release from priority might be ready to go to hearing, if that were to be set separately. And then I will include a direction to please continue to meet and confer with all of the parties. It sounds like there may be some fruitful discussions about the notice of preparation and the status of the CEQA document and the timeline for the CEQA document. Mr. McClure, if you would, in preparing a proposed timeline to bring to me early next year, if you would work with the parties and to the extent you can reach some agreement and consensus on how this should move forward. I am encouraged by the fact that I think everyone agrees that it sounds like the planning process is going well, that that your client is receiving input that's going well, that an appropriate project may be identified, and that will help focus the secret document. I mean, it sounds like good work is happening, and I want you to continue that good work. But I do want to set out milestones so that we continue to move forward. Particularly, I know COVID-19 sent us all for a spin and changed our timelines on most projects. But now that we're getting back into things, in spite of still working at home with barking dogs, which I apologize again for, I think we're all moving forward. So with all that said, I will look to you, Mr. McClure, first, then Mr. O'Brien, and then I'll ask if there are any other comments before we close for the day. And again, I will be looking at, we could pick a day today, actually, since you're all here. Let's look at our calendars, if we may, for early 2022, my goodness.
Ms. Kinsey, if we could look at a date before January 19th, I have a trial in Santa Barbara County starting on that date. Or if we can't do it before that date, it would probably have to be late February for me.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. And I will say we have a significant matter set in our office the week of January 10th, so we cannot do the week of January 10th. I would tentatively propose Monday, January 17th, unless that's a holiday. I don't have that marked here.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
That is a holiday. Of course it would be.
Ms. McKinsey, if I may,
Please.
this is Jennifer Hansen from Nevada Irrigation District. We would prefer for the next status hearing to be set in the month of January as opposed to February.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's look at Tuesday, January 18th.
That works for Nevada Irrigation District.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien, does that work for South Sutter?
Yes.
And I would be looking at the morning. And ideally, it won't be long. It'll be something like this, no more than 2 hours, probably an hour. Are there other parties who have conflicts with the morning of January 18th? Good, thank you. So I will set that in the ruling that comes out. I will set out a status conference for the morning of January 18th. All right, I think where I was I was turning to Mr. McClure to see if he had any additional comments. Is that
just to be clear, Ms. Kinsey, you will issue an order after this hearing, which will set the 18th as the next check-in, and you'll tell us how far in advance of that you want us to provide our proposed timeline and schedule?
Yes, and I anticipate it won't be significantly in advance. I want to give you as much time as possible to work through those issues. But yes, I will set specific dates. I will also do my best to describe what it is exactly I'm asking you to do. So
Okay.
that will all be in writing.
One other housekeeping matter, the administrative record that's posted online does not include NID's answer to the South Sutter Water District protest, as far as I could find. So I would like to submit that for inclusion in the administrative record. Is there a process for doing that?
If you would just email it to our office, that would be appropriate. And we will just take a look at that document and then upload it to the administrative record. It may just have been missed in our initial review. So I actually appreciate supplementing the record. It sounds like a document we want to have in there. So thank you.
If Mr. McClure could copy the service list on that transmittal, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yes, please. Any other items, Mr. McClure?
None further. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien, do you have any other items?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Are there any other parties who have any other items to raise or questions or concerns? As I said, there will be a ruling that I will issue in the next week or two, summarizing what we discussed today, and then we will meet again on January 18th. Is there anyone else? You may unmute and say something. I may not see your hand. Some of you use the hand button and that works, but I can't necessarily see all of you because there are so many.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Jeff Litton. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, Mr. Litton, I'm glad you could join us today.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't think I was going to have reception. I just want to briefly say, I think the benefit of going through the hearing sooner than later to decide the water rights is that it could change the course that NID might take with Centennial Dam if it's determined that South Sutter Water District gets their 80-year-old water rights from the Bear River for Camp Far West before NID gets their water for Centennial, then that would possibly impact NID's interest in pursuing Centennial Dam at this time. When we look at how much actual water there is not currently being captured by South Sutter at Camp Far West Reservoir, only 5 times in the previous 18 years studied was there enough water to meet NID's additional diversion of 221,400 acre feet, and only twice in the previous 10 years studied was there enough water. So to me, this is kind of the crux of the matter. If South Sutter Water District gets their water twice a decade, or NID gets their water twice a decade, if South Sutter wins the hearing and NID only gets their water twice a decade, I think that would impact their decision to take on building Centennial Dam at this time. That's my main comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Litton. I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else have any final comments before we close for the day? Well, then I just want to say I really appreciate all of you participating in this process and how quickly efficiently we were able to move through things. I really appreciate all of your input and joining us. I look forward to reconvening on January 18th. And you will see a status conference ruling from this office. And that will also be posted on the AHO webpage under this matter. So you'll be able to find it there as well once that is issued. So thank you again, and I will see you in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.